Hey crafty people, I'm Sarah, also known as Craft Nerd because I'm a nerd who loves to craft. Over the years I've dabbled in most types of crafting, although for the past decade or so I've been doing primarily card making and mixed media art. I've recently embarked on a junk journaling journey that I hope you'll join me on. So today we are working on our Locomotive Specimen Slide Light Up box. Today is part 2. If you haven't seen part 1, I'll have that video linked down below. In today's video, we're going to assemble the box and do some decorative touches around the sides and add the feet to the box and finish it up. Let's get crafting. So next we are going to take all of the strips of paper we cut, and they're 1 inch wide, and score them in half and then fold them. So score them all and fold them all in half, and I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll come back. Okay, so now that we have folded all of our pieces of paper, we are going to do some assembly, and I'm going to use Barely Art Glue because that gives me more wiggle time than Art Glitter Glue. And I do have an amendment because I don't remember what I said at the beginning regarding these measurements. The base piece and the top are 10 by 7. My short pieces are 7 inches, but I managed to cut my long pieces at 9 3/4, which is actually going to work out for me. And that was because originally I was thinking I was going to put the pieces on the outside, but then all we have for support for the lid is the paper pieces that we're going to use to put this together. And I decided that's probably not the best way of handling this. But it also probably means I'm going to need to trim down all of these pieces. So what we're going to do to start assembly, and I'm going to just wait and trim down when it's attached and see how that goes, is take one piece, add some glue to one side, and attach it to this piece. And this is why the wiggle room's important, because you want it flush to the edge there, because it's going to attach like this onto the bottom piece. So having that little bit of wiggle room so you can make sure it's properly in place is good. All right, that is attached, and I'm just going to take scissors and trim that down. Just snip that off. And actually, because this has got to go in between these pieces, am I on screen? Can you see the bottom? I'm going to do these guys first and attach them to the base piece. So again, glue, line it up and attach it to the piece of chipboard. And then what we're going to do is then glue that down over here. And this is a little long, so I'm just going to trim that now that it's attached. And so we're going to attach this to the bottom, and I am on screen, like this. We're going to add glue down on the bottom of the piece of cardstock and to the piece of chipboard. And we're going to line it up at the edge of the bottom piece. All right, so you want to make sure you've got it lined up at the bottom. Press it down good. And there's the first piece attached. And then we're going to flip around and do the same thing at the top. And again, it's a little long, so we're just going to trim that up. And I'm gonna go let the dog in. And so just attach it on so that now we've got both top pieces glued down. And what we're going to end up doing is taking an additional piece to reinforce this and attach it on the outside so that we've got reinforcement on all of our edges there. And this time I think before I attach it, it'll be easier to snip the extra off now. So I'm just gonna do that. Not very straight, but that's okay. It's gonna get covered. And this time just apply the glue to the whole piece. Add it on there. Just make sure you got it down nice and good and that you're on camera while talking to people about getting it on nice and good. So there we go. That's one side. I'm just gonna keep pressing down until it's adhered good. So now I'm gonna double check and make sure that's gonna fit. And it's gonna fit all the way. Yes, because I think what I'm gonna end up doing is cutting some additional pieces to go over on our corners. So putting this piece in, it's could be a little bit longer, but I think we can fix that with a piece of paper going over each corner on these sides, which I will show you in a little while. So I'm going to glue this one down. And I'm going to seat it all the way over on one corner and have the gap on one side instead of like evening out the gap. And then when I put the other side on, I'll switch where the gap is, which should help add strength. Just gonna keep pressing. Shift a little so you can see. I'm just pressing this and using the flat to keep this straight and square. And yeah, there's a little bit of a gap. So I don't know. I may try cutting off a little piece to fill the gap, or I may just put essentially a piece of this over to fill in our corners on the inside and the outside. And so that's half a part of our box. So then this piece will go on top like that. I think we're gonna go ahead and add this side, and I'll square it up so that there's no gap up the top here. I'm noticing I've got a little bit of paper overhanging, so we're gonna trim that. Yeah, this part's definitely the fiddly part of the project, in that we're gonna have to fiddle to get everything together. And, you know, while I did the math and the cutting beforehand, I haven't actually assembled one of these before. So let's put this piece on. Again, I'm gonna start by adding glue and attaching it to the side piece. That's a lot of extra on this one. So just press it on good. Gonna trim off our excess. And attach it here. And like I said, because I've got the little gap bit over here, I'm pushing it flush to the top and leaving the gap at the bottom on this side. And of course, now my other dog wants in. Hold on a sec. So again, just pressing it down and then dropping it and causing it to fall apart. I definitely think it's important to have that extra wiggle room that Barely Art provides, but it also means you got to hold it a little longer to make sure it's stuck. So there's the bottom of our box, and our top piece will go on like so, and is like a hair shorter. So we're gonna figure that out. We're probably gonna use the pulling in of the corners to tighten that up a little bit. So I'm gonna go let my dog in. So for the corners, I've gone ahead and cut a 1-inch wide strip, and then I'm gonna cut it down to 1-inch pieces. And I've already scored it in half because I figured once I cut them into 1-inch squares, it's gonna be a little fiddly to score. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And let's start with this corner, and I'm gonna take one of my little square pieces and put glue on both sides. And and just attach it so that it's got both edges. And then we're going to stand it up and do a piece on the inside. Now it's going to stick up a little. I'm going to trim that off after I do all 4 corners, which I'm going to go ahead and do and be back. And actually, before I go do that, just if you need to make any adjustments in where the pieces are lining up, do that as you're attaching. And I think this may need a little more glue. So I also went ahead and attached all of the outside pieces on that I had apparently forgotten to do. And now I'm just going to go around, and anywhere there's excess sticking up, I'm going to take a pair of scissors and just trim it off. So next we're going to attach the cardstock strips on the inside for attaching the top on. And I went ahead and marked all of them because they're going to need to be trimmed down since I measured based on the full length, but on the inside it's a little bit shorter and narrower. So I'm just going to trim them down and attach them in. Again, I'm going to use Barely Art glue for this because there's a little bit more wiggle room, and what you want to make sure you do when you do this part is attach it so it's flush with the top of the box. And what I'm doing down here is gluing the side flaps down, which I probably should wait until I install the top one before I do that, so that I can lift this part up to get it in. Okay, so now that they're in, I'm going to attach down the sides here. And actually, as I'm doing this, I'm realizing I should not do that yet, because we're going to put tin foil inside the bottom of the box. The reason we're doing that is it's going to help reflect the lights from the lights that are going in the box. Let's do that. Now, I already cut a piece that's big enough to fit in, but it's a little long on the sides, so we're going to need to do a little trimming. Okay, definitely should not have glued that down. Let's see if we can unstick that. Yes. Okay, great. So I can peel back the side pieces to give me more room to work inside. And what I'm going to do is cut down along here. Trim that piece off. What I'm going to do is stick glue in the bottom and start sticking down. And again, I'm using the Barely Arts because unlike the art glitter glue, it'll give me a little bit more time to wiggle things around and get things positioned properly. You can use whatever glue you like. You could use glue stick for this. All right, I'm going to stick it down in the corners all the way. It does not have to be perfectly smooth. You're really not going to see it all that much once the top piece is on. It's just to help reflect the light back out. And I'm going to glue it along the sides, but I'm going to make sure I trim. Don't know if you can see. So here's where it folds over. I'm just going to trim so that we don't have a lot of excess bulk to deal with. And then I'm gonna go let a dog out because my dog has decided he needs to go out. I'm gonna use bigger scissors for this. All right, so you can probably see I split the tin foil. It's not that big of a deal because that's gonna be underneath. But just be careful. All right, so I've got the tin foil all glued down, and now I am going to go back in and glue these guys together. This time I'm going to use our glitter glue because Barely Art takes a little longer to set and it's not really grabbing right now. If you are not familiar with art glitter glue, it does not actually have glitter in it. It was initially designed for gluing glitter. That's why it's called art glitter glue. All right, so that's going to serve as extra support when we put the front on. All right, so I've gone ahead and done a little bit of prep work for the next steps. I'm gonna let you know what those are. I did end up trimming a little off the top of this piece because it was a little bit longer than the box. So I just trimmed that up so that when we put the wraparounds on, it'll be flush. So I decided for the wraparounds that are gonna go on the top to hold everything in place to go ahead and do the eroded metallic technique again. And I figured I could pick the sides that I liked the best and they'll go on here. for the sides, I had originally had something else in mind, but when I made that decision, I hadn't decided that I was going to do the eroded metallic technique on the front. So I decided I needed to change my idea for what I'm going to do along the side. So I did the same technique on a couple pieces of watercolor paper. And instead of using I think that's the antique bronze, I used the brushed pewter. And I'm going to use this embossing folder to get kind of like a riveted metal look for putting along the outsides. And I think I have made enough that when I emboss these and cut them into the 1-inch strips that I need, that'll be good. And then finally what else I did was, these are going to be our feet. They are wood spools, and I'm going to attach them to the bottom, and it's going to sit on top of those like so. We'll glue them on in a little bit, but we're not done with them. What I went ahead and did was I gave them a coat of black gesso, and I've got the Finnibar ArtBasics heavy black gesso as the first step. Our next step is going to be covering them with natural sand. If you've watched me do any of the videos where I have made gears, this will be familiar to you. So I am just going to take some Liquitex natural sand paintbrush and just do basically a sloppy coat of this on the outside of my thimbles. I'm not going to do the top and bottom because I don't want them textured, since that will cause problems with it standing up properly. So a couple things to keep in mind while I do this before I cut away, since you don't need to see me slapping this on. If you're using a paintbrush to apply it, you want to be sure to clean your paintbrush really good, or it's going to gunk up the paintbrush and turn it into like a solid brick. And then before you go on to the next steps, you just need to let it dry, and you just need a thin coat just to give it a little bit of texture. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I've gone ahead and embossed them, and now I'm going to add ink. And I'm going to use ground espresso and some vintage photo just to get these grungier. And if you want to get them in between the raised bits, you're going to have to do a little bit of pressing, because if you just lightly drag it over, all you're going to get is the raised bits, and I kind of want to get a little bit everywhere to kind of grunge them up a bit. Just going to take a cloth and kind of smear it around. And then I'm going to dampen my cloth and remove a little bit of the grunge. I feel like I want to add a little bit more ground espresso in, but I want to be more focused in where I'm doing it. So I'm just going to grab a dauber and just add a little bit more in a few spots. Just kind of smear it in again, trying not to use the spot that's wet. And there we go. That's our eroded metallic using silver instead of bronze. And what I'm going to do is cut these into 1-inch strips so that we can apply them to the outside sides of the box. But I think before I do that, and I've gone ahead and added inks to this in the browns, is I'm going to attach the flaps all around and then put these on top, because otherwise there'd only be about a 1/2 inch of this showing. So that's what we're going to do next. And I'm just going to take my Barely Art glue, and again, I've decided that that's the piece I want to go on top, and so we're just going to attach these all around. And before I do that, I'm going to refold them just to make sure I know where the fold is, because we want it so that it'll sit like this once we put the top piece on, and actually I think I may set the top piece on. I think that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna leave the top piece there so that I make sure, because that's gonna add a little bit of height, that we're going like that and attaching it so that it'll actually cover. So we're not attaching the front piece yet. We're just making sure when we attach our strips that there's enough room for the fold over. And I am going to end up having to notch the top pieces because of where the holes are placed. I've got a little bit of overhang on this side, and so I'm going to, as I go along, trim off any excess bits. All right, I think before I attach that side, because it's getting harder to move this out with all the other pieces in place, we're gonna go ahead and put the lights in. Now I am gonna put a hole, and actually I might as well do it over here where I have the rip in the aluminum foil already. Using an awl to do this. Just try not to stab your finger while you're doing it, because I am going through 1, 2, 3, 4 layers at this point. All right, there we go. We've got a hole through, because we want to make the hole big enough, ooh, without damaging our front pieces. I should have done this before I did the front pieces. I want to make it big enough, so just keep working it, that we can feed our lights through. So we're going to take our light pack and just feed it through. So as long as the hole's big enough for everybody to go through. And I'm going to pull the whole strand through. All right, I've got all of my lights in. And it's wired, so theoretically they'll stay in place where you put them. And I'm doing it all along the edge because in testing it out, I noticed if it's underneath one of the slides, you like see the light bulb and it's not giving quite the effect I want. Now, they're not exactly, because they've been wrapped up and have their own little crinkly spots, staying exactly where I want it. So I'm probably going to use a little bit of tape. And tack them in place just to help them out with staying put. So just a little bit of tape. Turn it up this way, hopefully you can see. I'm just gonna put a little tape over the wire, keep it in place. turn the lights on so I could see where they are landing, and I'm gonna kind of just do them across. All right, so there it is. I just fiddled about with the lights until I got them where I wanted them. And I think at this point, I'm gonna glue this down so that we can get the top pieces squared away. Holding it down until it grabs all the way. And I'm gonna add the side piece on. That's gonna need some trimming. I'm gonna stand it up like this so that I can hopefully figure out where it needs to be trimmed. I don't know if you know, you cannot. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm standing it up. I'm looking here to see where it needs to be trimmed, just making a mark, and I'm gonna trim it off because, yeah, that's gonna make that easier to attach. If I do that, I'm just gonna add more glue since this sucker was not sticking on very good. And I'll turn it this way, which probably should have been what I did in the first place. So I trimmed it a little too short, but that's okay because we're going to be putting paper over that, so it's not a big deal. It'll get covered. All right, now actually we can glue the two sides down. And I think I'm going to use my art glitter glue for this because I don't need the wiggle time. I just need it stuck down. And also add some down here because that guy's not staying stuck. That side's down. Yeah, if you were noticing it gapping out a little along this side, go ahead and just add a little extra glue as you're doing this part so that you can be sure it's all stuck down nicely. Just hold it for a second till it catches. Now for this one, before we glue it down, because it's hitting where the holes are, I'm going to take a pencil this time and mark where my holes are so that I can come in and punch it out to make sure we don't have it interfering with those guys. So let me get my hole punch. Okay, so I'm gonna take my hole punch. This one will hopefully, work. And we're just gonna, and then double check, and it's not, actually it is exactly lined up right. Imagine that. So I went ahead and punched the holes so it wouldn't interfere with our jump rings there. And we're gonna just glue this piece down. And again, if anything's coming up as you're gluing down, just add a little extra glue. It catches, and then let's do the bottom piece. Now the crease is a little off because of the excess bulk, so we're just gonna have to hold it a little longer probably, and I'll probably run my bone folder along the edge just to crisp it up a bit. Now for our sides, we're just gonna cut this piece into 1 inch wide strips and cover all of the sides up. And again, before you glue anything else down, just double check everywhere's secure and down. So I've cut all my strips. I'm gonna turn this on its side and we're just gonna glue them down. This is more than 1 inch wide. Well, nuts. With all the extra layering put on there, we're a little wider and longer than I accounted for. All right, I'm gonna have a bit of a thing. All right, so I did some double checking and I do have enough length to cover the whole thing up, kind of wrapping as I go. And I'm okay having a little bit of this showing on the sides rather than redoing the whole thing. So I kind of jigsaw puzzled this together. So we're gonna start kind of in a strange spot. We're gonna start with a partial piece curved over here because I know this will work. So we're gonna go ahead and glue that down. And I'm making sure it's flush to the back so that I'm covering all of this and I can leave a little bit of that exposed. I'm okay with that. Now for this piece, I'm just gonna wrap it around and glue it down. The wraparound bit. It's really hard to keep on screen. Now we're gonna overlap here, and I don't necessarily want to do that, so I'm just gonna mark it. And actually, I think I am gonna do this. I'm gonna line my scissors up against the edge there. And actually make a smidge closer over. So I lined it up on the edge and then can you even see that? I lined it up on the edge and then I bumped it in a little and it's got a little bit of overlap, but I'm good with that. All right, there we go. The sides are all wrapped. And I like how that looks. Okay, so we do have a itty bitty bit of gap there. What I think I may do is just find a piece of paper I snipped off and just glue that in place to fill in that gap. Once that's dry, I'll trim off the excess. So we'll just let that hang out so you won't even notice it. Now back to the feet. I am gonna give them one more quick coat of black gesso because I don't know if you can see, but some of the spots where the sand is, the natural sand is a little white. So I just want them completely black before I go on to the next step in prepping them. All right, our feet are dry, so we are going to pull out some paints and paint them up real quick. For that, I'm going to use some DecoArts fluid acrylics in Cobalt Teal Hue and quinacridone gold. I'm just gonna mostly dry brush this on. And I'm not even going to bother to clean my brush, and I'm just going to go into the quinacridone gold and add a little bit here and there. Helps give it kind of a rusty feel. And I'm going to just add the barest hint of the antique bronze to it, just to give it a little bit of sparkle. There we go. These are our feet. Trim that off. So that's good. Now, I have noticed as I was doing this that the Distress ink that I applied to these pieces keeps coming off on my finger. So I'm going to use a little Distress glaze, which should seal it in. Just take a paper towel and wipe off any excess. For attaching the feet, they're obviously going to go on the bottom. I'm going to do one there, one there. Fingers crossed it's going to stand up. And I'm going to use Aleene's The Ultimate Glue. And what I am going to do first is put a little glue. Gotta be careful, this one can get a little messy. And I'm gonna do that where it's gonna be set, and then take it off and set it aside, and I'm gonna let that dry. And I'm gonna do it again over here, and hopefully that was on screen. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put glue on the bottom of my spool. I'm gonna place it down where it's gonna go, and I'm gonna lift it off and let that glue dry, because it will secure more firmly if I glue it to the glue than if I glue it straight to this. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna leave that sit, and once it's dry, we will actually attach our feet. So the glue's dry. I'm gonna take my feet and add a little bit more glue and stick them on. I'll leave those sit to dry before I try standing it up. So there's what it looks like all finished. So that's all for today. If you enjoyed this video, please do all the things that lets YouTube know you enjoyed the video. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave me a comment down below. Thanks for joining me, and happy crafting!